The applause in that ballroom had a grain to it that Nora Vale could feel in her back teeth, and not one clap of it was meant for her. For 3 years, she had let this town believe she was exactly what the man on stage was about to call her. The soft kind of service, a helper's heart. A woman who had never once had to be brave. He had no idea what she had buried in the dark just to keep breathing. None of them did until a Navy sniper with 2 holes in him came through the ambulance doors. At 9:40 that night, Ash Gray, pinching his own artery, shut with 3 fingers, and spent the last air in his chest on 4 words that tore the floor out from under the quiet little life she had built. Your father sent me, but that was still an hour away. Right now there was only the ballroom and the chandelier light, and the voice. Look at her. Right there. That is what quiet looks like. Nora froze with a tray of sparkling water balanced flat on her left forearm. The voice belonged to Preston Vaughn. He stood at the front of the Talbot VA Medical Center's donor hall in a charcoal suit that had never known a wrinkle, a slim microphone hooked at the corner of his mouth. 250 donors turned toward him in one soft rustle of silk and wool. He was pointing across the room. He was pointing at her. You all drove up the mountain tonight to celebrate service, Vaughn said, and his voice had that warm, rehearsed drop that men learn in green rooms. And I think when we hear that word, we picture something huge, something loud. But friends, look at this woman. Heads came around, glasses lowered. 250 faces found Nora by the catering station, and she did not move. This, Vaughn went on, gentle as a hand on a shoulder, is service too. The soft kind. The kind that never has to be brave. She will never carry what those warriors carried. She knows that. She just shows up. She pours the water. She does her small good part, and there is a real beauty in a life like that. A few people made a low, sympathetic sound. A woman near the front murmured that it was just lovely. Nora looked at the floor. She let her shoulders round forward and her chin drop the way she had trained herself to do 1,000 nights running, until it felt less like a choice and more like weather. The room glittered around her, all cut crystal and iced shrimp, and men who had bought their tuxedos for exactly this. Every one of them here to feel something clean about a war none of them had been near. Down a dim corridor past the velvet rope, the actual hospital waited. Worn floor tile, the low electric breath of oxygen concentrators. The men this gala said it honored most of them already asleep in narrow beds. Nobody with a glass in their hand tonight had walked back there. That was the whole design. Vaughn was a brand more than a man. Good teeth, a voice built in a studio, a book with his own face on the cover. He had never worn a uniform a single day. He had turned other people's courage into a keynote and sold it back to rooms exactly like this one. And tonight, the medical center had wired him $60,000 to make its donors weep on cue. The ringing in Nora's right ear rose half a step the way it always did in a loud room. A high, thin whine that had lived behind her eardrum since a night on a ridgeline she was not allowed to talk about. She had learned long ago to hear around it. Even now, without deciding to, she was reading the hall by sound. 3 exits, one behind the stage curtain nobody had marked. The rattle of the ice machine cycling in the service alley. The way the far bay doors sucked a thin thread of cold mountain air across the marble every time somebody leaned on them. Old habits. They never left. She had stopped asking them to. "Sweetheart," Vaughn called across the room, not unkindly the way you would call a child. "Be a dear and float me one of those waters, would you? All this talking dries a man right out." The crowd laughed, warm and easy. Nora lifted the tray. She crossed the marble with her eyes down and her steps soft, and she set a glass on the little podium shelf beside him without a word, and she turned to go. "See that," Vaughn said, not even glancing at her. "No fuss, no ego. We could all stand to learn something from a heart like hers." More applause. Nora walked back toward the service doors with the empty tray, her face smooth as a still pond. Her hands were perfectly steady. That stillness was the only fully true thing in the whole shining room, and not one soul in it noticed. She pushed through the swinging doors into the prep kitchen and let the noise fall away behind her. In through the nose, hold out slow the count her father had drummed into her before she could read. Her hand went to the pocket of her scrubs and closed around the coin without her telling it to. A challenge coin, worn smooth as a river stone, its stamped edges gone soft under 3 years of her thumb. She did not take it out. She just held it the way some people hold a rosary, and then she let it go. He is a snake in a good suit, that one. Renata Cruz leaned against the steel counter, arms folded over her scrubs. Night charge nurse, 22 years on the floor, the only person in the building Nora would call something close to a friend. He is paid to be, Nora said. You let him wipe his feet on you in front of the whole county, and you just stood there and took it. It is easier that way. Renata studied her the way she had been studying her for 3 years, like a puzzle with 2 pieces that would not quite meet. You are a strange one, Vale. Quietest woman I ever worked a floor with. But once in a while, I catch your hands moving on a patient, and I think that woman has done something. Somewhere. To somebody. I empty catheter bags, Nora said. Renata did not buy it. She never fully had. One of these nights are going to surprise the daylights out of somebody. Nora almost smiled. I really doubt that. The kitchen door banged and Regina Faust came through it in a wave of perfume and stress tablet clutched to her chest. Deputy director of the facility, and tonight the woman with everything to lose if a single centerpiece tipped over. Her eyes swept the counter that trays Nora and moved on without landing. Where are we on the second wine pour? Faust said to no one and everyone. Mr. Vaughn's people want the lighting warmer for the photos. And can somebody please close off the long hallway? Donors keep wandering back toward the patient wing, and it is not the image we are building tonight. She said, patient wing, the way another person might say water damage? I will get the hall, Nora said quietly. Fine. Good. Faust was already turning away. Just keep it invisible back there. Keep it invisible. Nora had made a religion of exactly that. She set down the tray, pushed through the last set of doors, and stepped into the long, dim corridor where the gala died to nothing in 3 paces. The music thinned. The perfume thinned. And then it was just the hum of the old lights and the smell of the place she actually worked, and the far red glow of the exit sign at the end of the hall where Ward C waited with its rows of sleeping men. This was where the real people were, the ones the war had finished using and set down and mostly forgotten. 2 Vietnams worth of them. Desert Storm. 20 long years of mountains and sand after that. Old skin and tired eyes and machines that breathed for them in the dark. She was halfway down the hall reaching for the corridor gate to swing it shut on the party when the ringing in her ear did something it had not done in 3 years. It changed pitch, not from the noise behind her, from something ahead of her, out past the walls, out in the black spread of the mountain night. A low pressure she felt more than heard the way you feel a truck coming before you hear its engine. Her hand stopped on the cold metal gate. For one breath, she stood dead still in the empty corridor, head tilted a half-inch toward the dark, listening to a thing that had not arrived yet. Then she made herself let go of it. Just nerves. Just a long shift, and a loud man and a coin worn thin in her pocket. She pulled the gate shut, and she turned back toward the light and the trays and the small, safe life. And she did not yet know that the pressure she had felt was a set of headlights 40 miles out on a dark highway, running flat and bleeding toward her door. Back in the light, Preston Vaughn had found his second wind. "I want to tell you about a young man I met once," he said, and the room settled, the way a room settles when it thinks it is about to be moved. He had lowered the microphone to chest height, which was his tell for sincerity. Pinned down, out of options, everything gone wrong that could go wrong. And you know what this kid said to me with the whole world coming apart around him. Nora, refilling the water pitchers at the side station, went still, without meaning to. She knew before he finished that the story was borrowed. She could hear it in the shape of it. A real memory comes out crooked. It snags on the wrong details, the smell of something a joke nobody else would find funny. This one ran on rails every beat, sanded down, and lacquered for the stage. "He looked at me," Vaughn said, and he told me, "Sir, fear is just the body asking permission to be brave." The applause came up soft and grateful. Somebody near the bar said, "Oh, that is good," and typed it into a phone. Nora set down the pitcher. She had been pinned down once on the wrong side of a border she was not allowed to name, and nobody up there had said anything that would fit on a coffee mug. They had said her name. They had said it fast, and then slower, and then not at all. She had knelt in scree the temperature of a walk-in freezer and held a young man's chest closed with both hands and told him the bird was 2 minutes out when there was no bird coming at all. She set that down where she kept the rest of it in the cold room at the back of her, and she closed the door on it, and she picked the pitcher back up. "Miss," Vaughn called, scanning the crowd, and then finding her again like she was the easiest thing in the room to find. "One more of those waters when you get a chance. And folks, is she not a saint? Give her a hand." They gave her a hand. 250 people applauded her for the act of walking a glass of water across a floor, and Nora crossed the marble and delivered it, and didn't look up, and she felt the applause on her back, like a light rain she was too tired to come in out of. Then the ringing in her ear moved again, and this time she moved with it. It wasn't the party. It was under the party threaded through it, coming from the dark corridor she had gated off 10 minutes before. A sound most people in that hall would never have caught in 100 years. A change in the pitch of a breath. Down the hall in Ward C, someone had stopped breathing the easy way and started breathing the hard way, and the machines had not caught up to it yet. And Nora Vale had. She was already walking. Tray down on the nearest table gate, open into the dim, her soft steps lengthening into something with purpose in it. The party fell away in 3 paces the way it always did. Bed 4. Mr. Osgood. 87 Korea and a lifetime of cigarettes after it. He was on his back, and his lips were the wrong color, and his chest was working too hard for the little air. It was moving that high, tight wheeze pulling at the base of his throat. Aspiration. He had thrown up in his sleep and breathed some of it down, and in 90 more seconds the pulse oximeter on his finger would have started to scream, and a code would have gone out, and it would already have been late. Nora did not wait for the machine. She had his bed flat, and then his whole body rolled onto his side in one smooth motion. Her knee braced against the frame, her hand cupping the back of his skull, so his airway ran downhill. She swept his mouth clear with 2 gloved fingers. She had the Yankauer suction off the wall and into the corner of his throat before the wall unit had fully spun up, clearing the passage in short, careful passes, her other hand flat on his ribs, counting him back toward a rhythm that made sense. His color came up out of the gray. The wheeze softened. His chest found an easier stroke and held it. The whole thing took under a minute, and it was over before the oximeter alarm ever sounded. "There you go," she said quietly to a man who would not remember it. She wiped his mouth, straightened his gown, brought the head of the bed up to the angle that would keep this from happening again, and set the suction line where the next nurse would find it. Then she stepped back into the shadow at the foot of the bed, and she let her hands go still, and she waited for her own pulse to come down off the thing it did when the work took over. "You did that before it even beeped." She turned. 2 beds down in the dark, a young man was sitting up against his pillows watching her. Danny Ruiz, 31. 3 tours worth of things behind his eyes, and a right leg full of hardware that would not let him sleep. He had been at Talbot 6 weeks, and he had not once let anyone all the way in. Nora had tried gently the way you try a door you already know is locked, and every time he had gone somewhere flat and far away, and she had let him go. "Couldn't sleep," she said. "Don't mostly." His eyes moved off her face. You heard him choking. From the party. Through the wall. It was not quite a question. "Lucky guess," Nora said. Danny looked at her a moment longer than was comfortable, and then he looked away, and that was as much as he was going to give her tonight. "You should try to rest," she said, and he did not answer, and she let him have that too. She checked the rest of the row on her way out of habit. And at bed 7, a dry voice stopped her. "They still using you for a party favor out there. Elmer Grady, 81, retired Navy hospital corpsman, the kind they used to send in with the Marines, and he had gone in with them at a place he only ever called the Low Country, in a tone that shut the subject. His lungs were a ledger, with more entries in the debit column than the credit one now, and he knew exactly how the accounting was going to come out. And he had made a wry sort of peace with it, that Nora found she loved him for. "Something like that," she said, checking his oxygen line, smoothing the blanket up over his chest. "You should have upended that picture over his fancy head." She laughed low, and for a second, she felt younger than she had in years. "And lose my job? Bah!" Grady's eyes were milky at the edges, but there was flint underneath the particular flint of a man who has watched a lot of people leave and learned to read the ones who are staying. He took her wrist in one light, papery hand. "You move wrong, you know that, too quiet. Most folks that quiet are hiding a temper or a hurt. You are hiding something with a lot of hours on it." Nora went still. "I have been in a lot of bad rooms in my life," Grady said. "The kind where the air changes right before it goes wrong, where the whole building sort of holds its breath, and the old-timers feel it in their fillings before anything happens." His grip tightened. "It is doing that right now. Tonight. You feel it too. I have been watching your face. You felt it before I said a word. For one heartbeat, the mask slipped a fraction of an inch. Her spine came up straight. Her chin came level. Something old and steady looked out through her eyes, and Grady saw it clear, and he nodded once slow like a man whose long suspicion had just been confirmed, and did not much surprise him. Then it was folded away again, gone back into the quiet. "Get some rest, Elmer," she said softly. Building's holding its breath veil. He let go of her wrist and settled back into the pillow, his eyes already sliding shut. "Something is coming up that mountain. You mind the door tonight?" She stood in the doorway a beat longer than she needed to. Out past the walls, the low pressure was still there, and it had not gotten smaller. If anything, it had come closer, the way a sound does, when the thing making it is running toward you and not away. Just nerves, she told herself again. Just an old man who dreams, and a loud man in a good suit, and a long night on a quiet floor. She almost believed it. She was very good at almost believing it. She had built 3 years out of almost believing it. She pulled the corridor gate shut behind her, and she went back toward the light, and behind her ribs folded small and silent and patient. The woman she used to be shifted once in her sleep and did not fully wake. Not yet. There was a version of the story Nora Vale told herself on good nights, and it went like this. She had left the work because the work was over, the way a season is over, and she had come to the mountains to be quiet, the way a person goes to the shore to be near the water. Clean. Chosen. A woman closing a door softly behind her. It was a lie, and she knew it was a lie, and she told it anyway, because the true version could not be carried across a work shift without spilling. The true version lived in the cold room at the back of her, and she visited it only when she could not stop herself, and standing at the med cart at 11 at night with Grady's words still in her ears, she could not stop herself. 3 years ago there had been 6 of them, and a downed aircrew on the wrong side of a line on a map in a country whose name she had signed papers promising never to say. She was the medical officer, which on that team meant she was the one who kept everyone breathing, and also the one who could put a round where it needed to go, because her father had raised her to be able to do both before she was old enough to drive. The corridor out was supposed to be clean. Someone had checked it. Someone had been paid to check it. Someone had also been paid to sell it. She let herself have the next part in pieces, because the whole thing at once would put her on the floor. The dark. The first crack of a round coming from a ridge that was supposed to be empty. The way the whole shape of the night turned over and showed its teeth in half a second. Theo's voice on the net, calm, always calm, calling out positions in that flat sniper cadence her father had trained into a dozen men and into her. Theo Reyes. Halyard. The steadiest hand she had ever worked beside, and the only person she had ever let, all the way in which in that life was its own kind of wound waiting to happen. She had reached 3 of them in time. She had not reached Theo. She had knelt in the cold scree with both hands inside a chest that would not hold pressure no matter what she did. And she had told him the bird was coming. 2 minutes. 1 minute. Look at my eyes, breathe when I tell you. And the bird had not been coming, because the same corridor that let the enemy in had kept help out. And she had felt the exact moment the man she loved stopped being a person she could save and became a weight she had to carry down a mountain in the dark. She got 2 of the living out. The scree had taken the first knuckle of her left ring finger clean, and she had not noticed until an hour later. A fragment had gone in under her right collarbone and stayed there, and the surgeons had put a small plate over it, and it ached now in cold weather, like a second heartbeat that only she could hear. Those were the marks. Everyone thinks the marks are the worst of it. The marks are the easy part. The marks you can see. They told her afterward it was a bad tip. Bad intelligence. Nobody's fault, they said, in the specific voice institutions use when they have decided a thing will not be looked at any harder. She had believed them, because believing them meant it was fate, and fate you can survive. What you cannot survive, not for long, is the truth. And the truth was that a man in a good office had traded the lives of the finest people she ever knew for a wire transfer and had gotten away with it clean, and she did not know his name. So she had gone dark. Not the operational kind of dark she knew how to do in her sleep. The other kind. She let the phone go unanswered. She let the old numbers expire. She came up the mountain to Talbot to the ward full of men the war had already finished with, and she made herself small on purpose, and she learned to pour water and look at the floor and answer to sweetheart, because a woman who is nobody cannot lose anybody. And Nora Vale had decided she was done losing people forever. Her father had let her go without a fight, which was not like him. Master Chief Ezra Vale. Deacon to the men he trained because he could make you feel forgiven and terrified in the same sentence. He had taught her to hold her breath under cold water until the panic came, and then to sit inside the panic without moving until it got bored and left. Noise is just noise. Nora, he used to say, kneeling beside her at the edge of the black water. You do not fight the noise. You turn it down. Then your hands do the work, while everybody else is still busy being loud. She had turned the noise down on 3 continents. She had turned it down in rooms with no doors. And then one bad night had turned it all the way up and left it there, and she had walked away from the only work that had ever quieted it. He had died 2 weeks ago. In his sleep, they told her. No pain. A phone call from a man she half remembered informing her of a funeral 3 days out, and she had not gone. She had told herself it was operational caution, that the people who might still be interested in the woman she used to be would be watching a grave like that. All true. Also, a coward's blanket, warm and thin. The real reason was smaller and worse. She could not stand in a row of the men her father had made and watch them fold the flag and hand it to no one because his only child had decided that grief was a door she could nail shut and live behind. So she had let him go into the ground alone, and she had come to work the next morning and poured the water and looked at the floor, and she had called that surviving. Nora realized she had been standing at the med cart with a blister pack in her hand for a full minute, not moving. She set it down. She pressed the heel of her hand flat against her sternum over the plate over the ache, and she breathed the count. In through the nose. Hold. Out slow. Down the hall, the party was winding toward its close. She could hear the change in the room's tone through the walls, the loosening, the good nights getting louder and less sincere. In an hour, the donors would be gone, and the caterers would be stacking chairs, and the mountain would be quiet again, the way she had trained herself to need it quiet. She finished the med pass. Bed 9 turned and dry. Bed 12's line flushed. Grady asleep at last, or pretending one hand curled loose on top of the blanket. Danny Ruiz staring at the ceiling with his jaw set awake, always awake, and she stopped at his door and said, "Get some sleep, Ruiz," in the gentlest voice she owned. And he did not look at her, but he said, "Quiet, you too." And it was the most he had ever given her, and she carried it back down the hall like something breakable. The pressure out past the walls had not gone away. She had stopped pretending to herself that it would. At 9:40 by the clock over the nurse's station, the ambulance bay doors at the far end of the corridor did not open the way a scheduled transfer opens them. They slammed, not the soft pneumatic sigh of a wheelchair coming in from a transport van. A crash, metal on metal hard enough to bounce. Then boots on tile fast and heavy and wrong, and a voice shouting for help in a way that told Nora everything before she understood a single word of it, because it was not the voice of a person who was scared. It was the voice of a person who had been trained a long time ago exactly how to shout when everything had gone to hell. Penetrating trauma. "I need a doctor. He is crashing. Where is your trauma team?" And then, under it, lower ground, out through gritted teeth, from the gurney itself, in a flat sniper's cadence she had not heard in 3 years, and would have known at the bottom of the ocean. "Where is she? I need Vale. Get me Vale." The blister pack slid out of Nora's hand and hit the floor. Nobody in this building knew that name to shout it like that. Not as a summons. Not as the last thing a dying man says. She set her hand flat on the counter, very slowly. The way you set down something when your whole body has just gone quiet and clear and terribly finally awake. Nora came around the nurse's station at a walk, not a run, because running is what you do when you have not decided anything yet. And she had decided everything in the half-second it took the blister pack to hit the floor. Down the long throat of the corridor, the gurney came into view under the hard fluorescent light. 2 paramedics fought it forward, and they were losing. She could read it in their hands in the way the shorter one kept glancing at the monitor and then away from it like a man not wanting to watch a clock run out. On the gurney, a big man lay half on his side, one shirt gone black and heavy with blood from the collarbone, down 3 fingers of his own right hand, jammed hard up into the hollow beneath his left shoulder, holding something shut by main strength alone. That detail told her more than the blood did. Civilians who are bleeding out thrash and grab and beg. They fight the people trying to save them. This man lay as still as he could make himself and spent nothing he did not have to spend 3 fingers locked into his own axilla, because some part of him understood even now, even gray, that letting go meant the light went out in under 2 minutes. That was not a civilian's instinct. That was a man conserving himself the way you conserve yourself only if someone taught you hard a long time ago that panic is a luxury and stillness is ammunition. She was already cataloging him before she reached the gurney, the old scan running itself without her permission. Ash-gray skin sheeting with sweat, lips going the color of a bruise at the edges. The black soak high on the left chest and shoulder, and it was pulsing, a slow, dark welling in time with his heart, which meant artery, which meant she was counting minutes, and there were not many of them. And his breathing quick and shallow, with a small, ugly hitch on the left side, and a tug at the base of his throat with every pull of air. A chest wound as well as the shoulder. Air getting into the space around the lung and not getting out. The pressure climbing. She had watched that exact thing kill a man once, in the time it takes to boil an egg on a hillside, while she screamed for a needle nobody handed her. She had promised herself on her knees, in that dust, that it would never once beat her again. 2 ways to die running side by side, racing each other for him, and Nora Vale knew precisely what to do for both. That was the whole trouble. A ward nurse does not know how to pin a subclavian bleed against the first rib with her fingers. A ward nurse does not diagnose a tension pneumothorax from 30 feet by the pull of a man's collarbone. A ward nurse does not carry in the deepest and oldest muscle she owns the exact spot to slide a needle and buy a life on a cold floor with no surgeon in the building and no time to send for one. If she stepped forward, now the quiet was over. 3 years of it. Every wall gone in front of whoever was left in that ballroom and every phone in their hands. "We got nobody," the lead paramedic was shouting down the hall, his voice cracking on the edges. The doc went home. The on-call went to the gala. There is no surgeon in this building. County is 50 minutes on a good night, and this is not a good night. We are losing him right here. The gala crowd had spilled toward the noise the way crowds do. Donors in evening wear gathered at the mouth of the corridor, drawn by the dramaphones already rising in pale, manicured hands, and pushing through them to the front, arranging his face into a mask of grave, capable concern, came Preston Vaughn. "People, please give these professionals room to work," he announced, taking command of absolutely nothing. "Let them do what they are trained to do. This is exactly the kind of moment they prepare for." Except there were no professionals here tonight. There was a night charge nurse going white to the lips. 2 paramedics past the far edge of anything they knew. A ward built for slow, gentle deaths, and 50 miles of black switchback road between this floor and anyone who could open a chest. And there was Nora, standing very still in the middle of the corridor while the whole thing came apart in front of her. The gurney braked hard 3 feet from her. The man on it turned his head. His eyes were going soft at the edges, the light in them guttering low. But they found her face across the last of the distance, and they locked onto it, like it was the one fixed point left in a spinning world. And he stopped fighting the paramedics for a moment, and something in him settled. "Vale," he rasped. Pink foamed at the corner of his mouth. "It's you, thank God. Thought I'd miss you." The lead paramedic stared. "You know this guy." "It's a common name," Nora said. Her voice came out flat and careful, a voice with the door still shut behind it. The man on the gurney rolled his head slowly against the pad. "No," and a wet cough took whatever he had been about to say and left more blood on his lips than she wanted to see. When the words came, they came in pieces, each one costing him. "Your father," he breathed. "Master Chief, he sent me. Before he," the cough again, "Deacon, sent me to find you." The corridor tilted under Nora's feet. Her father. Ezra Vale gone into the ground 2 weeks ago while she poured water on a mountain, which meant her father had known this was coming. which meant that somewhere at the end of his life, he had reached across 3 years of her silence through a dying stranger to put something into her hands one last time. She did not let herself finish the shape of that thought. There was a place for it, and the place was not here, and the time was not now. There would be time later to come apart. There was no time now, and she had been built first and last for exactly the kind of moment where there is no time. For a single breath, the corridor fell away, and she was 11 years old, at the edge of cold black water with her father's big hand, flat and warm between her shoulder blades. Turn the noise down, Nora. Then your hands do the work. The dying man's grip on his own shoulder was slipping. His fingers were losing the strength to hold the artery, and when they let go, the last of him would come out onto the floor in about 90 seconds, and Nora reached out and caught his wrist and pressed his failing fingers back into place with her own, and she felt the calluses there. The same calluses her father had carried, the mark of a life spent on a trigger and a rope and a rifle stock, sun and salt and 10,000 rounds. One of her father's men, sent by her father, bleeding out on her floor while a room full of strangers filmed it. The decision had been made the instant he said Deacon. Everything after was just her body catching up to it. "All right," Vaughn said, close now, his voice pitched warm and managing sliding in beside her. "This poor woman is completely overwhelmed. Anyone can see it. Somebody get a real hospital on the line. Honey." And he put a soft hand on Nora's shoulder to move her gently aside the way you guide a child out of a doorway. "Step back now. You are in the way of the people who do this for a living." The monitor screamed. The numbers on it fell off a cliff, 90 over 50, then 70, then a hole opening underneath that where a blood pressure used to be. "He's coding," the lead paramedic shouted, and the last of his composure went with it. "He's going to arrest right here in the hall. Have got nothing left." Grady's dry voice drifted up from the back of Nora's mind. "The building is holding its breath. Something is coming up that mountain." The old corpsman had felt it in his fillings an hour ago. He had been right. He was always right about the air. 3 years of small, 3 years of the floor, 3 years of being the soft kind of service, the kind that never had to be brave, the kind that would never know what the warriors knew. Nora looked down at the man her father had sent, at the message still burning weakly in his fading eyes, at the dark pool spreading out now across the clean tile toward the tips of Preston Vaughn's very good shoes. And something in her that had been folded up small and silent for a very long time quietly stood up to its full height. Her chin came level, her shoulders rolled back and down, the soft round of her spine straightened into a hard, clean line that had been drilled into her on 3 continents and had never truly left her, only waited. Vaughn's hand slid off her shoulder and hung in the air with nowhere to go. She dropped to one knee in the blood, and when she spoke, the voice that came out of her was not the voice that had carried water across that floor an hour before. It was low, it was level. It did not rise, and it carried to every corner of the corridor anyway, the way a voice only carries when it has given orders under fire and been obeyed. Everybody stops talking. Now. The corridor went dead silent. They stopped talking. Every one of them. 200 people in evening clothes and 2 paramedics and a $60,000 speaker. All of them frozen by a woman on one knee in another man's blood. Because whatever had just walked into her voice was not a thing you argued with. It was a thing you obeyed while your mind caught up later. You. She pointed 2 fingers at the lead paramedic without looking away from the patient. "Your kit. 14-gauge needle, the longest one you carry, in my hand. Then 2 units of saline, both lines wide open pressure bags if you brought them. Go." He went. He did not decide to go. His body did it. You. The second medic. Chest seal from your trauma bag, and combat gauze, the hemostatic kind, all of it. on the floor by my knee where I can reach it. Renata. The charge nurse jumped like she had been touched with a live wire. Crash cart down here, and every person wearing a tuxedo goes back behind that gate. Move them gently, and move them now. Nobody moved for one more half-second. They only stared, because this was not the woman who had looked at the floor all night. This was somebody else, entirely wearing the same oversized blue scrubs and the same quiet face. But the eyes had changed. The eyes were doing arithmetic now fast and cold, the specific arithmetic that decides who is still breathing at midnight. I said now, Nora said, and the room came apart and jumped to her the way a room does when it has secretly been waiting all night to be told what to do. Then it was just her and the man on the floor and the 2 clocks running down. She got her eyes on the chest first, because the chest would kill him faster. Her hands ran down its left side, reading him by. Feel the way she read everything by touch and repetition and 10,000 hours. The left chest was tight and full and getting fuller. The trachea at the base of his throat had begun to lean, pulling away from the failing side. The veins in his neck stood out like cord. Tension pneumothorax building toward the point where the pressure would shove his heart across the middle of his chest and squeeze it until it could not fill. And that point was very close. "What's your name?" she said to him low, while her fingers walked his ribs and counted down. Not because she needed it. Because a man who answers questions is a man still perfusing his brain, and she wanted to hear him keep doing it. "Rook," he managed. "Delgado." "Sam." "Okay, Sam, you picked a hell of a night to visit." The lead medic slapped the long 14 gauge into her palm, and she uncapped it with her teeth without looking. Her fingers found the space, counted the ribs settled on the spot on the side of his chest, below the armpit, the lateral site where the wall was thin and the lung was close, and there was nothing underneath to ruin. 5th intercostal space, anterior axillary line. She had found this exact spot in daylight, and in pitch black, and in the back of aircraft and flat on her belly, in mud on men whose names she could not make herself go and read off a wall. "What is she doing?" Vaughn said, and the studio polish was gone out of his voice, now replaced by something thin and frightened. "That is a needle. She is a nurse. Somebody stop her before she kills that man." Nora did not look up. She did not acknowledge that he existed. She set the needle to the skin, angled it just over the top of the rib below where she had counted, and drove it in with one smooth, controlled push. A hiss, long, sharp, unmistakable. The sound of trapped air rushing out of a chest that had been strangling on it. His left chest fell as the pressure let go. His next breath came deeper. The one after that, deeper still. The bruise color at his lips faded back toward gray, and then toward something that was almost nearly the color of a living man. On the monitor, the falling numbers caught and hung and began at last to climb. 70, 78, 85 over 50, and holding. The corridor was silent enough to hear the saline running. "Chest seal," Nora said, and the second medic pressed it into her hand, and she stripped it and sealed the wound around the catheter, one job closed. Then she moved to the one still bleeding him out, the shoulder. High and tight in the hollow of the axilla, too high for any tourniquet ever made, tucked up under the collarbone, where the big vessel runs before it becomes the arm. No clamp could reach it here. No strap could compress it. Only a hand that knew exactly where to push and exactly how hard, and was willing to cause a screaming amount of pain to buy a life. She drove 3 stiff fingers up into the hollow beneath his collarbone and pressed the artery flat against the hard shelf of the first rib underneath the one pressure point that would stop this. The dark welling slowed and then very nearly quit. Sam Delgado arched off the gurney and groaned through his teeth, and Nora leaned into it and did not let up, because that groan meant a brain still getting blood, and good pain was the best news she'd had all night. She looked up for 1 second, scanning for the next pair of hands, and found instead an old man in a good jacket standing at the front of the frozen crowd. Silver-haired, a small pin on his lapel, and he was not staring at her the way the others were. He was already moving toward her sleeves, going up his forearms, and the look on his face was not horror or pity. It was recognition, plain and total, the look of one person seeing a thing they had seen before. "I've got the pressure, tell me the spot," he said, and it was not a question, and there was no panic anywhere in it. "Special Forces." She did not have to ask, but she asked. 18 Delta, retired, show me your hand." She slid over an inch and set his big fingers where hers had been up into the hollow, down against the rib. "Do not lift. Do not shift. Do not get curious. You are this man's blood pressure. When I say pack, you make room, and not 1 second before." "Copy," the old soldier said, and his hands went to stone. And for the first time all night, Nora Vale was not doing this entirely alone. "Combat gauze." Renata put it in her grip. Nora waited for the old man's fingers to make the smallest space, and then drove the treated gauze down hard into the wound around the pressure point, packing it tight, her thumbs sealing it, her lips moving in a silent count she had run more times over, more men than she would ever say out loud. 3 minutes of direct pressure. She held it and counted it, and did not rush it, because rushing it was how you lost the whole thing at the end. "Mark the time," she said. "Write it on his arm if you have to. This is controlled by pressure, not closed. He needs a vascular surgeon inside the hour, or he loses the arm, maybe more. Renata, get the bird in the air now, not in 5 minutes now. Tell them subclavian junctional hemorrhage controlled in the field, tension pneumo, decompressed, patient stabilizing. But critical, have vascular and thoracic standing by on the pad before he lands." The lead paramedic stared at her over Sam's chest, white to the lips. "Who are you?" he said. "Nurses don't." "That was, who are you?" She did not answer him. Sam Delgado's hand crept up off the gurney and found her forearm and gripped it with the very last strength he had. "He said," Sam whispered, and every word was a coin he was spending that he could not get back, "to tell you he was proud. The whole time. Every year. Even when you went dark on all of us and let the numbers go dead. He never once stopped. He made me promise. Find her. Put it in her hands, tell her." Nora's jaw set to stone. Her eyes stayed dry by an act of pure will that most people will never have to learn and could not manage if they did. "Don't talk," she said, gentle now, her thumb still sealing the wound. "You did the job. You found me. Rest." But he was not finished, and he had come too far to stop. His other hand fumbled at the collar of his ruined shirt and pressed something small and hard into her palm and folded her fingers over it before she could look. She didn't have to look. She knew it by weight and by the worn softness of its edges under her thumb, the same instant her skin touched it the way you know your own name. A challenge coin, rubbed smooth as a river stone by 3 years of a thumb that was not hers. The mate to the one in her pocket. Her father's coin. "So you'd know it was real," Sam breathed. "So you'd know it was really him sending me. He said you'd try to talk yourself out of believing it. Said you were stubborn like him." Something deep behind Nora's ribs cracked, silent and clean, in the place where no one had been allowed in for 3 years. She closed her hand around the coin until the stamped edges bit into her palm, and she held the thing her father had carried against her heart, while 3 fingers of her other hand held a stranger's life against a rib, and she did not fall apart because she had spent 3 years learning exactly how not to. And a few more minutes could not undo that. They could not. Chopper's 12 out. Renata called her phone, shaking against her ear. "They want to know who controlled the bleed in the field. They need a name for the flight record." The whole corridor waited for it. Nora knelt in a wide pool of a Navy sniper's blood, her hands red past the wrist, her long braid come loose around a face gone calm and old and certain her father's coin biting into her palm. She looked nothing at all like the woman who had floated a glass of water across this same marble an hour before. Preston Vaughn found his voice. He had built an entire career on knowing the right thing to say, and he reached for it, now, the way a drowning man reaches for a rope. "Well," he said, with a shaky little laugh climbing after the moment that had left him behind. "Lucky thing we had a nurse on hand with a little extra first aid training. Let's hear it for the wonderful staff here at Talbot. Folks, this is exactly the kind of quiet dedication I was." "Sit down," Nora said. She did not shout it. She did not even turn her head to look at him. But the two words landed like a steel door slamming shut in an empty house, and every person in that corridor felt the floor of it. And Preston Vaughn sat down into a folding chair he had not known was behind him, and he did not say one more word. The old Special Forces medic held his pressure and looked at her across the gurney, and into the enormous silence he said quietly, so the whole frozen room could hear it. "Ma'am, I ran medicine on 3 deployments, and I have seen a manual subclavian control and a needle decompression done clean under 2 minutes. No kit, no doctor, no light. I have seen it exactly twice in my life before tonight. And it was never, not once, a nurse." He held her eyes, and his voice went rough at the edges. "So I'll ask what everybody in this room is thinking. Who are you really?" Nora rose slowly to her feet, letting the old medic take the full weight of the pressure, talking him through the handoff with 2 quiet words. She wiped her hands down a towel Renata held out, and she did not curl her shoulders inward, and she did not drop her eyes to the floor. Her chin stayed level. Her gaze went first to Sam Delgado, alive and breathing on the gurney because of her hands. It moved to the silver-haired soldier who already knew the answer. Last and longest, it settled on Preston Vaughn, small and gray in his folding chair, the salesman of other people's courage, with nothing left in the case to sell. "My name is Nora Vale," she said, and her voice filled the corridor without lifting at all. "Before this ward, I was a medical officer with a joint special operations element. 12 years. The kind of medicine you do in the places the maps go blank." She looked at Vaughn while she said it, not cruelly, just steadily, the way you look at a thing you are finished being afraid of. "I did the work you sell tickets to, and I buried every minute of it, because the last time I did it, it cost me everyone I loved." The silence in that hall was complete. You could have heard a pin come down on the marble. Vaughn's mouth opened. Nothing came out of it. For the first time in his lacquered life, the man who sold courage was standing in front of the real article, and he had no anecdote for it. No line, no clean little phrase to close the moment down. He just sat. And that was when the ambulance bay doors at the far end of the corridor opened again. Not a crash this time. Worse. Quiet. 3 men came through fast and low, and together plain dark clothes moving with the particular economy that a certain kind of person never fully loses, scanning the hall corner to corner. Not looking for the exits, looking for threats, looking for one person. The man in front found Nora across the length of the bloody corridor and stopped walking. He lowered his hands slowly so she could see them. Empty. Deliberate. She knew the face under the gray stubble. Older, now. Harder. A fresh seam of scar tissue splitting one eyebrow. But she knew it the way you know. A song from the first note. "Sundown," she said. Isaiah Marsh let out a breath that had 3 years in it. "Hello, Lark. You look like hell. I mean that with love." They had bled together once on the far side of the world, in a war that never made a headline. He had walked her out of a bad valley on a torn hamstring with her arm over his shoulder. She had put his heart back into rhythm on a riverbank, with her hands and a flat refusal to let him quit. You do not forget the people who keep you breathing. How did you find me? She said. I was careful. I was a ghost. You were the best ghost I ever saw, Marsh said. We didn't find you. His eyes went to the gurney. Rook found you. We followed Rook. Sam Delgado stirred at his own name. Marsh crossed to him and put a hand flat on his chest. Briefly, the way men in that world say a great deal without any words at all. He came to you before he came to us, Marsh said. Because the Master Chief told him to right at the end. Your father spent his last good afternoon making Rook promise 3 things. Find Nora, put the ledger in her hands, and tell her a truth he carried for 3 years and never could make himself say to your face. Nora's jaw set. What truth? Marsh glanced down the corridor, both directions, the old habit that never dies. The gala crowd had pulled back against the walls, 200 people in evening clothes gone silent, watching 4 strangers speak a language none of them could follow. 3 years ago, your team did not die because of a bad tip, Marsh said. I know that is what they told you. It was a lie, and your father knew it was a lie for the last 3 years of his life, and it ate him alive that he couldn't prove it in time to give it to you. Your corridor was sold. A private outfit traded your exfil route for a wire transfer and buried it so deep it took Rook 2 years to dig it back up. You blamed yourself for 3 years, Nora. It was never yours to carry. It belonged to a man named Adrian Rennick. The name came down into her like a stone into a deep, still, black well. Her hands went cold, not with fear, with something far older and far steadier, something she had locked in a box 3 years ago and sworn on the memory of Theo Reyes, never to open again. Rennick, she said, and the word tasted like rust and rifle oil. Halcyon Strategic, his firm. Rook put it all together. Accounts, dates, the middlemen, the whole rotten machine, and he was bringing it to the only people left who could end Rennick for good. Marsh nodded at the soaked dressing high on Sam's shoulder. Rennick's people caught him on the interstate 2 hours ago. Put 2 rounds in him at speed. He kept driving. Drove 50 miles up a mountain past 3 closer hospitals, bleeding out the whole way to get here. To you. Because a dying Master Chief told him his daughter was the only person on this earth who would take the ledger and actually finish it. Renata stepped in close, white to the lips, her phone still in her hand. The helicopter is 9 minutes out. They want to fly him to county. No, Marsh said flatly. They don't. Nora understood it before he finished the thought. She felt the whole shape of the night turn over and show its teeth the way that other night had 3 years ago in the cold. Because Rennick's people are still out there, she said, and they are coming here. For Rook, for the ledger, for every face that watched him come through that door. Marsh nodded once. 6, maybe 7. Every one a former operator. They are good lark. They are very good. And they do not leave witnesses, because leaving witnesses is the one thing the whole job exists to never do. The corridor seemed to shrink around her. Nora looked past the men in dark jackets down the long hall toward the gated dark of Ward C, toward the rooms full of old soldiers who could not stand and could not run, and could do nothing at all but lie in their beds and trust the people around them. Toward bed 7, where an 81-year-old corpsman was lying awake right now, certain the building was holding its breath. He had been right. He was always right about the air. That was the moment Preston Vaughn decided to take charge. All right. All right. That is quite enough of this. He pushed up out of the folding chair, smoothing the front of his charcoal suit, reaching for the authority he had worn like cologne all night. I do not know who you people think you are, but this is a hospital, and I am the ranking representative of the event, and I am going to call the police this instant. and we are all going to calm down and handle this the correct, professional, orderly way. Mr. Vaughn." Nora did not raise her voice, and the whole room turned to her anyway. There was no round left in her shoulders. She stood in the center of the corridor, with a Navy sniper's blood drying brown on her hands, and her father's coin closed in her fist. In a few minutes, armed men are going to come through those doors. They are extremely good at exactly this. The police are 20 minutes down a mountain on a fast night, and we do not have 20 minutes. The only thing standing between 200 civilians and those men is what we decide to do in the next 90 seconds. So I'm going to need you to do the single most useful thing you have ever done, and be quiet." Vaughn stared at her like she had grown a second head. "You pour the water," he said. It came out of him almost plaintive. "You're the nurse who pours the water. I was that too," Nora said. "For 3 years. It was the hardest job I ever had." She was already turning away from him, already turning the room into a board in her mind, already 3 moves deep. "Renata, 200 people out the south doors, fast and quiet into the parking structure and away from the building. You walk in front. Nobody runs. The second one person runs. You have a stampede in a doorway, and people die there instead of anywhere else. Move them with purpose and keep them moving. Can you do that?" Renata's chin trembled once and then set. "Yes, I can." "Good. Take Vaughn. Put a door count in his hands and give him a job." "What about the ward?" Renata's voice cracked straight down the middle. "Elmer. Ruiz. The men who can't walk. They can't run, Nora. They can't do anything but lie there." Nora turned and looked the length of the dark hall toward Ward C, and for one single heartbeat, the calm on her face opened, and underneath it was something that would have made Adrian Rennick turn his car around and drive back down the mountain if he could have seen it. "The ward stays with me," she said. "Nobody gets past me to those men. Not tonight." Marsh's hand settled on her shoulder. "It's 4 of us, and one's bleeding on a gurney against 6 or 7. We can lead them off into open ground, draw them away from the building. You know that's the cleaner play." Nora shook her head. "They came for the ledger, and they burn everything else to get it. Leading them off does nothing for the men who can't follow. We hold here. We hold the ward. That's the mission now." Marsh searched her face a long moment, and then something in his hard expression eased the way a man's face eases when he sets down a weight he has carried a very long way. "There she is," he said softly. Wondered if she was still in there. He turned to the 2 men behind him. "You heard the officer. This is her ground and her plan. We move on her call." Nora crouched by the gurney one more time and took Sam Delgado's cold hand in both of hers. His eyes fluttered, found her held on. "You did it," she told him low and fierce. "You found me. You can stop fighting now, Chief. I've got the rest of it." "Ledger's in the plate carrier," Sam breathed. "Sewn in the back panel. Don't let them put it in the dark again, Vale. That's all he wanted. Not in the dark again." "It won't go in the dark," she said. "I give you my word." She reached inside the ruined carrier and felt the hard, flat edge of a waterproof pouch stitched into the lining by a man who had known he might not live to hand it over himself. She gripped it the way she was gripping her father's coin, the way she had gripped Theo's hand on a mountain 3 years ago and not been able to hold on. And then at the far end of the corridor, every light in the wing went out at once. The monitors died mid-beep. The overheads dropped into black. Down the hall, the exit signs guttered to a thin, bloody red and held there. Somewhere below the building, a backup generator coughed once, twice, and gave up the way a thing gives up when someone has made sure it will. In the sudden dark, Isaiah Marsh's voice came flat and calm. "That's them. They cut the power. They're already up the mountain." A pause. "Lark, it's your house. Call it. Darkness is a weapon. Most people never understand that. They think the dark hides them, and it doesn't. The dark belongs to whoever stays calmest inside it, and it eats everyone else alive. On the worst night of her life 3 years ago, Nora Vale had lost the dark. Tonight, she was going to take it back. "Nobody moves," she said into the black, low and even. "Let your eyes find the room. Breathe slow. They killed the lights to make us scatter and scream. We are not going to give them 1 inch of it." Around her, the thin red of the exit signs began to bleed, shape back into the world. The gurney, the crash cart, the long throat of the corridor running down to the gated ward, and the men who could not save themselves. Her mind had already become the thing it was forged to be years before she ever pulled on a pair of scrubs. Cold fast, reading the floor plan like a board 3 moves deep. "They come from 2 directions," she said. "The bay, because that's the blood trail Rook laid coming in, and they'll follow it right to the door. And the East Service stair, because it's dark and quiet, and it puts them behind us with a straight run at the ward. They'll split. Standard doctrine. Half and half. That's how I'd do it," Marsh said. "Then you and 1 man hold the bay. It's a true choke. 1 wide door they funnel through 2 at a time, and 2 patient men can hold a doorway against 4 all night if they keep their angles and their tempers." She pointed into the dark without looking at it. "Your other man is with me on the east stair. That's the one I want. And Rook and the Ledger go somewhere those men cannot reach." She was already moving, pushing the gurney fast and near silent on its good wheel deep into the black mouth of Ward C, in past the gate, and she rolled Sam between 2 heavy steel supply carts, tucked out of any line of sight from the door. Elmer Grady was awake. Of course he was awake. "Told you," the old corpsman whispered. His eyes glittered like wet stones in the red light. Building was holding its breath. "You did tell me. You're going to get insufferable about this." "Already am." His hand found her sleeve. "What do you need, sailor?" She pressed the waterproof pouch into his thin, papery hands and folded his fingers closed over it. "One last watch, Elmer. Corpsman to corpsman. Whatever you hear through that door, you hold this, and you do not let 1 living soul take it off you, but me. Can you hold that line?" His grip tightened on the pouch with a strength that startled her. "I held a perimeter in worse weather than this, with worse men beside me than you," he said. "Go on. Go do the thing you came up this mountain to do. I've got the package." She almost broke right there. The clock would not let her. "Heads down," she told the dark ward, to every old man, in every bed. Men who had been young once in jungles and deltas, and places with no names. "Stay low. We've got you. Nobody comes through that door tonight." Then she turned to face it, and she went to work. She did not have a rifle. What she had was better. A whole hospital and 12 years of knowing how to look at an ordinary room and see 50 ways to end a fight inside it. Moving up the East Hall, she gathered her tools and set each one where her hands would find it blind. A full oxygen cylinder, green and heavy, wheeled into the shadow of an alcove. A fire extinguisher lifted cold off its bracket. A defibrillator charged, clipped to her hip. And then the thing that mattered most, the thing that turned the whole night on its head. Every portable exam light and procedure lamp on the floor dragged onto rolling stands and lined down the corridor, plugged into the crash cart's battery bank, and Rook's transport power pack, angled to face the east stairwell door. Switches taped down into her palm on a single length of call cord. They had killed the lights to own the dark. She was going to give it back to them all at once. "Prepare the ground," her father used to say. "The fight is half over before the enemy ever arrives." The man Marsh had left with her, a quiet operator named Osei, watched her rig it and said nothing. He had heard the stories about Deacon's girl, the medic who fought like weather. He was about to find out they were the polite version. The east stair door eased open at the far end of the hall. 3 shapes flowed through it, low and smooth, fanning into the corridor, the way only well-trained men move. Night vision down over their eyes, weapons, up calm, confident hunters who had done exactly this in a dozen dark countries and come home every time. They had never once done it on ground that belonged to Nora Vale. She let the lead man clear the alcove. Then the oxygen cylinder came around in a short, controlled arc, out of the dark, and he simply folded and dropped, and did not get up his rifle skittering off across the tile. Before the second could bring his weapon around, she closed her hand on the call cord, and every light on the floor came up at once. Not a flicker, a flood. A solid white wall of it straight into 3 sets of amplified night vision, tuned for near total darkness. The tubes bloomed and whited out, and blinded them worse than any fog took the one advantage they had built the whole assault around, and turned it into a searing gray blindness they clawed at their own faces to escape. "Lights killed, I can't see, I can't." He never finished it. Osei took him from the flank fast and clean. Nora took the third with the defibrillator paddles, a charge built to restart a stopped heart. Used instead to put a strong man on the floor without stopping his for good. She did not want these men dead. She wanted them down and finished, and there is a difference between those 2 things that only the most disciplined fighters alive ever learn to hold. 3 down. Under a minute, not one round fired into that ward. Behind her, in the red and white light, the old soldiers had watched the whole thing from their beds without a sound. They had seen combat, most of them decades, and half a world away. And they knew it when it walked back into the room. And in his bed by the window, one young one had watched too. Danny Ruiz up on his elbows, eyes wide and awake, and clear in a way Nora had never seen them. Her radio crackled. "Marsh tight but steady. Bays held. 3 down here restrained. But Lark, listen to me. Rennick is not with them. He sent his whole crew through the doors and stayed back. That is not him. He leads from the front. Has." Nora's blood went cold for the second time that night. Rennick had not come for Rook through the doors at all. Rennick had come for the one thing in the building worth more to him than the man who had shot him. He had come for the ledger, and the ledger was in the hands of a dying 81-year-old man in a dark ward, guarded by no one, because she had pulled her people east and sent Marsh to the bay and left the only room that truly mattered with nothing in it but old men who could not rise. "Elmer," she breathed, and she was already running. She tore back through the corridor, past the men she had put down boots, silent on the tile, her whole body narrowing to one straight cold line. The ward gate came up fast. Low and quiet, she went through it. And there was Adrian Rennick. He had come up through the old utility chase behind the linen room, the one route into the ward she had not sealed, because nobody but a ghost would know a building's bones that well. He stood over Grady's bed in the red light, a big, calm man with a pistol in one hand and the other open palm up patient as a grave. The pouch-old man, Rennick was saying soft and reasonable. "Hand it up and you go right back to sleep. That's the whole deal. Simple." Elmer Grady looked up at the man with the gun. 81 years old. A tour with the Marines in a country he only ever called the Low Country. Lungs spending themselves one slow breath at a time. He pulled the waterproof pouch closer against his chest, under the thin blanket over his stubborn old heart. "Son," Grady said, "I've been dying for the better part of a year now. You are going to have to come up with something a good deal scarier than a pistol." Rennick sighed the sigh of a man out of patience and raised the gun. "Rennick!" He turned toward the sound of his own name. Nora stood in the gated dark, blood dried on her hands, her father's coin closed in her fist, her father's terrible stillness, sitting plain and cold in her eyes. And for the first time in a very long and very bloody career. Adrian Rennick looked afraid. "You," he said slowly. "Deacon's girl. I heard you went in the ground after that valley. Quit the work, fell off the earth." "I did," Nora said. "You're the one who put me there." She took one slow step into the ward. His pistol tracked her, but his gun hand had changed. The smallest tremor ran through it. She saw it the way she saw everything. He knew the stories, too. "Easy now," he said. "Word is you're a nurse these days, so let's both be smart about this. I take the pouch. I go back down the way I came. Nobody else in this room has to get hurt. Not your old men. Not this brave old fool. All you do is stand aside and let me walk." "Put it down, Rennick. You know I can't do that." "Then you already know how this ends." For a long moment the ward held still. The old men frozen. Breath held. Grady's fingers locked white around the pouch. Out at the bay the gunfire had stopped, which meant Marsh had won, which meant help was seconds away, and Rennick knew it. And the knowing made him desperate. And desperate men make mistakes. He swung the pistol off Nora and onto Grady. "The pouch right now, or the old man goes first and that's on you." That was the mistake. Nora moved. She crossed the room before the barrel finished its turn inside the gun, the way her father had drilled into her 10,000 times on a cold dock before she could read. The wrist taken and turned up and out. The single shot punching harmlessly into the ceiling, raining plaster down over the beds. And she did not stop there. His own weight, the bed frame, the floor, every cold law of physics her father had taught her at the edge of black water, all of it turned against him in one continuous motion. And then Adrian Rennick was face down on the tile of a forgotten veterans' hospital. His pistol spinning away into the dark, his arm locked up in a hold he had no prayer of breaking. 3 years, Nora said very quietly, leaning her weight into the lock, her voice never once rising. "You sold my corridor for a wire transfer. You let me believe their blood was on my hands. I carried Theo down a mountain, and I carried the reason why for 3 years, and it was you the whole time." "Then finish it." Rennick spat against the floor. "Go on. I can feel you wanting to. You do it and we're square. Deacon's girl." Nora was silent a long moment. The whole ward waited, and then she eased the pressure. Just slightly. Not to free him, to make a choice in front of witnesses where everyone could see it. "No," she said. "That's what you would do. That's not what I do." She drew his hands behind his back and bound them tight with the cord off the window blinds, the knot of someone who had done it many times, in many places. "You're going to live, Rennick. You're going to stand up in a courtroom under bright white lights, and every name in that ledger is going to stand up beside you. That isn't mercy. It's worse. You're going to watch the whole thing you built come apart in the daylight, where the world finally gets to see exactly what you always were. And I'm going to be there. So will my father's name. So will Theo's. We're going to sit in the front row and watch it go into the light, because you spent 3 years keeping it in the dark, and you were never once going to be allowed to keep it there." The ward gate banged open. Marsh came through first, then the others, and behind them the first red and blue wash of police lights came spilling down the corridor as the cavalry finally arrived 20 minutes late, exactly as she had known they would be. Marsh took one look at Rennick face down and bound and breathing, and let out one long, slow breath. "You held the ward." "I held the ward," Nora said, and then a small dry voice from the window bed. For the record, every head turned. Danny Ruiz was sitting all the way up, and his hand was on the wall panel beside his bed, on the emergency call switch he had been holding down since the moment the lights came up. "Been ringing that the whole time. Figured somebody downstairs ought to know we had company." He looked at Nora, and something that had been shut in him for 6 weeks was open now. "You said nobody gets past you. Wanted to help hold the line. It's about all I got left to hold with. Nora looked at him at the clear, open thing in his face, and she nodded, one to slow the way one soldier answers another. "You held it fine, Ruiz. You held it fine." Elmer Grady lifted the pouch in one trembling hand. "I do believe this here belongs to the government of the United States," he announced to the whole room with the full dignity of a man who has just won the last firefight of a long life. "Held the perimeter. Lost nobody. You can put that in the report." Nora crossed to his bed and took the pouch, and then his thin hand, and for the first time in 3 years in front of every soul in the room, she let her eyes fill and did not fight it. "Outstanding work, Corpsman," she whispered. "Knew it was in you," Grady said, his voice gone soft and thready. "Told you. Quiet ones are either hiding a hurt or holding a line. You were doing both." His fingers squeezed hers. "Don't you go back in the ground, sailor. Thing as good as you does not belong buried. Promise an old man." "I promise," she said. And she meant it. By the time the sun came up gray over the ridgeline, the long night was over. Sam Delgado was in surgery across the valley, at County expected to keep his life and his arm the round, taken out of his shoulder, and the air drained clean from his chest, all because a nurse on a forgotten ward had known precisely what to do in the dark. Rennick and his crew were in federal custody. The pouch had passed to serious people who would spend the next 2 years taking apart everything Adrian Rennick had built on the bodies of better men. And Preston Vaughn stood alone in the emptied hall, in his fine charcoal suit, holding nothing. Nora found him there as the first real light came through the tall windows. He could not meet her eyes. "I owe you an apology," he said, and the words came out small, stripped of all their polish. "I stood up there and I called you. I had no idea what you—" "No," Nora said. "You didn't. All those speeches," he laughed thin with nothing inside it. "All those years on all those stages. And I have never once in my life done a single thing like what I watched you do tonight." She looked at him a long moment. She could have ended him with one sentence, and every person who ever heard about this night would have cheered her for it. She chose a different sentence. "Then stop selling it," she said, not cruelly, almost kind. "Go find out what it actually costs a person. Maybe one day you'll have earned the right to talk about it." She left him standing there in the light, and did not look back because some debts are paid in full just by walking away whole. Marsh was waiting by the doors, wearing the look she remembered, the one that always came right before an offer. "You know what comes next. We could use you, Lark, the real you. I could have you reactivated before noon. New name, new ground. You disappear back into the work and finish what we started. Deacon's daughter back in the fight. Just say the word." It was everything she had been 3 years ago. The shadows, the mission, the clean, cold purpose of being a weapon aimed at the right thing. Nora looked down the long, bright corridor toward Ward C, where the morning was coming up gold, through the windows, where old men were waking, who would not have woken at all if she had run instead of stayed. And at last, she understood the difference Grady had been trying to teach her. "No," she said. Marsh blinked. "No. I spent 3 years hiding because I decided the only way to keep from losing people was to make myself nobody. And I spent 12 years before that believing the only way to matter was to make myself a weapon." She shook her head slowly. "I had it wrong both times, Sundown. I'm not going back into the dark, and I'm not pouring water with my head down anymore either." "Then what does Nora Vale do now?" She looked back toward the ward, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, a real smile found her face and stayed. "This place is full of men who came home from the same country that sent us," she said, "and nobody here speaks their language. Nobody knows what a man's eyes do 3 years after a thing he can never say out loud. Nobody knows how to reach a kid like the one in that window bed." She held up the 2 hands that had pulled a life back from the edge in the dark. "I do. So I'm staying. I'm going to build something real. Trauma training, tactical medicine, peer work, run by somebody who has stood exactly where these men are standing. Right here. Marsh nodded slow and deep, the way one soldier salutes another without lifting a hand. Your father would be proud of you. He already was, Nora said softly. Somebody made sure to tell me. The whole way up the mountain. 3 months later, they opened the new wing at the Talbot VA. They had wanted to name it for a senator or a donor with a recognizable face and a big enough check. Nora told them no. She named it the Grady Room for a Navy corpsman who held a perimeter on the last hard night of his life and never let go of the package, and who lived just long enough to see his name go up over the door before his tired lungs laid him gently down to rest at last. On the morning it opened, a young man came through the doors of it, shaking, unable to put a single word to what was wrong, certain no living person could understand. A nurse with a loose brown braid and clear eyes and a plate under her collarbone that ached in the cold, sat down in the chair beside him. She did not look at the floor. There was no round left in her shoulders. Beside her, quiet, sat another young veteran with hardware in his leg and something newly steady in his face there, because she had asked him to be, because sometimes the person who reaches you is the one who is in the next bed over. She looked the shaking man dead in the eyes, soldier to soldier, and said the only words that have ever truly reached a person in that much pain. I know, Nora said. I've been there too. Let's get you home. Respect is not a title anyone hands you. It is not a uniform or a medal or a microphone or a speech or a name carved into a wall. Respect is what you do on the night it costs you everything to be seen, when no one in the room expects a single thing of you. Nora Vale spent half her life learning the hardest truth there is. The bravest thing a person can ever do is not to hide what they are. It is to stand all the way up, out in the open light, and let the world finally look. If Nora's story reached something in you tonight, do one small thing before you go. Tap that like button so the next person who needs this finds their way to it. Leave a comment and tell me where in the world you are listening from, because I read every single one of them. And if you have not yet, subscribe and stay a while. This is Silent Ranks Stories, where the quiet ones turn out to be the last people you should ever underestimate. So tell me, if you had been standing in that hall when the lights went out, what would you have done? Now turn the lights down low, and I will see you in the next one.